I thought taking my daughter to Spain would save us. Instead, it destroyed everything I had left. My name is Emily Carter, and I am about to tell you a story that will sound impossible, that will make you think no modern court system could allow this to happen. But it did. And it happens to hundreds of mothers every single year. 3 years ago, I woke up in a holding cell in Madrid, my wrists bruised from handcuffs, mascara streaked down my face, and my 7-year-old daughter Lily somewhere in the city with lawyers and social workers I had never met. The Spanish police had just informed me that I was a criminal, an international child abductor, that the man I had fled from, the man whose hands had left marks on my neck just weeks before, had every legal right to take my child back to his country, back to Australia, back to him. But let me take you back to the beginning, because this story, like all tragedies, started with hope. It started with love. It started with me believing that I had finally found something real. I was 29 when I met Daniel Whitmore. It was January, the kind of gray, drizzly Portland winter that makes you feel like the sun might never come back. I was working as a graphic designer at a small agency downtown, living in a studio apartment in the Pearl District, and feeling like my life had become this predictable loop of work, gym, Netflix, sleep. My friends were all getting married, having babies, buying houses in the suburbs, and I was still alone, still wondering if I had somehow missed my window. That is when I downloaded the language exchange app. I had taken Spanish in college, and I thought maybe learning a new skill would make me feel less stuck. I was not looking for romance. I swear I was not looking for romance. Daniel's profile picture showed him surfing at some gorgeous beach, all tanned skin and white teeth and that effortless confidence that some men just have. His bio said he was Australian, living in Sydney, wanting to improve his Spanish and teach English. He was 32, worked in finance, loved travel and adventure. We matched to practice languages. That was it. That was supposed to be it. Our first video call was supposed to be 30 minutes. We talked for 3 hours. He was charming, funny, self-deprecating in that Australian way. He asked me real questions, not just the surface-level stuff. He wanted to know what I was passionate about, what I dreamed about, what scared me. And he actually listened to the answers. We started talking every day. Morning coffee calls before I went to work. Late-night conversations when neither of us could sleep. He sent me photos of Sydney, the harbor, the beaches, the city skyline at sunset. I sent him photos of Portland, the food carts, the Japanese garden, the view from Powell's bookstore. It felt like we were building this private world together, just the two of us. After 6 weeks, he sent flowers to my office. 24 white roses with a card that said, "For the woman who makes me smile every single day." My coworkers lost their minds. My best friend Sarah said, "Okay, but be careful. You do not really know this guy." I brushed her off. I knew him. I knew him better than I had known anyone in years. 2 months after we started talking, Daniel flew to Portland to meet me in person. I was so nervous I almost threw up in the Uber to the airport. But when I saw him walking through arrivals, that smile that I had seen on my phone screen suddenly real and right in front of me, all the nervousness melted away. He stayed for 2 weeks. We did all the Portland things, hiked to Multnomah Falls, ate at every food cart we could find, drove out to the coast, and watched the sunset at Cannon Beach. He met Sarah and my other friends. Everyone loved him. He was attentive, polite, funny. He held doors. He remembered little details. He made me feel like I was the only person in the world who mattered. When he left, I cried for 2 days straight. And then we started planning the next visit. He came back 6 weeks later. Then I went to Sydney for 3 weeks. By the time I landed back in Portland, I knew I was completely in love with him. The decision to move to Australia did not feel reckless at the time. It felt like the bravest, most exciting thing I had ever done. Daniel had a good job, a beautiful apartment in Bondi, and he promised me we would build an amazing life together. I could freelance as a designer from anywhere. We could travel. We could be happy. My parents were worried, but they tried to be supportive. My dad said, "Just promise me you will be careful, kiddo. You do not really know what you are getting into." My mom cried when she hugged me goodbye at the airport. Sarah drove me and held my hand the whole way. At the departure gate, she said, "If you ever need anything at all, I am here. Okay? Promise me you will remember that." I promised. I had no idea how much I would need that promise. The first year in Sydney was everything I had dreamed it would be. Daniel and I got married at a small beach ceremony in Byron Bay. Just us, his family, a handful of friends, and a celebrant who married us as the sun set over the ocean. I wore a simple white dress I found at a vintage shop. Daniel cried when he saw me walking toward him. It felt perfect. His family seemed welcoming enough, though I noticed pretty quickly that his mother, Patricia, had a very specific vision of what a wife should be. She was traditional in a way that felt almost old-fashioned. She expected me to cook elaborate meals, to keep the apartment spotless, to always look presentable. She would come over unannounced and run her finger along surfaces to check for dust. She would open my fridge and make comments about what I did or did not have stocked. Daniel would laugh it off. "That is just Mum," he would say. "She means well. She is just very house-proud." I tried to see it that way. Cultural differences, I told myself. You are in a new country. You need to adapt. But there were other things that bothered me. Small things at first. Daniel wanted to know where I was all the time. If I went to the grocery store, he would text asking when I would be home. If I mentioned meeting up with a friend I had made through a local expat group, he would ask a lot of questions. Who is she? Where did you meet her? Why do you need to make new friends? Is something wrong with spending time with me? I told myself he was just protective, that he loved me and wanted to make sure I was safe in a new city. But it felt suffocating sometimes. When I got pregnant 6 months after the wedding, everything shifted. I was not planning it. We were not trying. But when I saw those 2 pink lines, I felt this overwhelming wave of joy. I called Daniel at work, and he came home early with flowers and champagne that I could not drink and tears in his eyes. But almost immediately, his behavior changed. He became obsessive about my health. He wanted to know every detail of my prenatal appointments. He insisted on coming to all of them, even the routine ones. He started tracking what I ate, what I drank, how much I slept. He said it was because he was worried about me and the baby, but it felt like control. His mother became even more involved. She started coming over almost every day. She would let herself in with the spare key Daniel had given her. I would wake up and find her in my kitchen, making tea, tidying things, rearranging my cabinets. She had opinions about everything: the foods I should eat, the vitamins I should take, the names we should choose, the way I should decorate the nursery. I tried to set boundaries. I asked Daniel to please tell his mother to call before coming over. He got angry. "She is trying to help, Emily. Why are you being so ungrateful? She is excited about her first grandchild. This is how Australian families are. You are too American, too individualistic." I stopped asking. Lily was born on a rainy Tuesday in March. The labor was long and hard, 36 hours that felt like it would never end. But when they finally placed her on my chest, all tiny and perfect and screaming, I forgot about everything else. She had Daniel's eyes and my nose and 10 tiny fingers that wrapped around mine like she was holding on for dear life. For a few weeks, I forgot about everything that had been bothering me. Daniel was wonderful with Lily. He would wake up in the middle of the night to help with feedings. He would sing to her in this soft, gentle voice I had never heard before. I thought maybe fatherhood had changed him, softened him. But the peace did not last long. When Lily was about 6 weeks old, I made the mistake of going to the grocery store without telling Daniel first. He was at work. I did not think it was a big deal. But when I got home, there were 17 missed calls and 23 text messages. He came home early, and I had never seen him so angry. "Where the hell were you?" he shouted. "I have been calling you for an hour. I thought something happened to you and Lily." I tried to explain that my phone had been on silent in the diaper bag, that I was just at the store, that everything was fine, but he would not listen. He got in my face, yelling so loud that Lily woke up crying in the other room. He said I was irresponsible, that I was a terrible mother, that I could not be trusted. Then he punched the wall next to my head. Not me. The wall. But close enough that I felt the air move. Close enough that I flinched and covered my head with my arms. Close enough that I realized, for the first time, that I might actually be in danger. He apologized almost immediately, started crying, said he did not know what came over him, that he was just so worried, that he loved us so much it scared him. He brought me flowers the next day. He was sweet and attentive for a week. But it happened again, and again. He would explode over something small, a dish left in the sink, my not answering his call immediately, my making plans without asking him first. He would yell, throw things, punch walls, and then he would apologize, cry, promise it would never happen again. His family told me I was too sensitive. Patricia said, "Daniel is passionate. He cares deeply. That is just how he is. You need to learn not to provoke him." His father said, "Men need respect, Emily. If you are not giving him that, of course he is going to get frustrated." I started to wonder if maybe they were right. Maybe I was too sensitive. Maybe I was not trying hard enough. Maybe this was just how relationships were, and I had unrealistic expectations because I had been single for so long before Daniel. But then Lily started getting older, started understanding more, and I could see the fear in her eyes when Daniel yelled. I could see her little body tense up, her face crumple, her hands cover her ears. That was when I knew I could not keep making excuses. When Lily was 2, I told Daniel I wanted to go back to Portland for a visit. I missed my family. I missed my friends. I needed a break. He said no immediately. His face went hard, his jaw clenched. "Why do you need to go back?" he asked. "What is wrong with being here? Are you not happy?" I tried to explain that I just wanted to see my parents, that I had not been home in over 2 years. He said, "They can come here if they want to see you so badly." I said they could not afford the flight, that it was easier for me to go there. He said no again. When I asked why, he looked at me with this cold expression and said, "Because I do not trust you. I think you will take Lily and not come back." I promised I would never do that. I swore on everything I held sacred. He still said no. And that was when I realized the truth. I was not living in a partnership. I was living in a prison. I started researching. Late at night, after Daniel had gone to sleep, I would sit on the bathroom floor with my phone and Google things like leaving abusive relationship Australia, taking child out of country, international custody laws. That was when I learned about the Hague Convention. The Hague Convention on the Civil Aspects of International Child Abduction is an international treaty signed by over 100 countries. Its purpose sounds simple and good. If one parent takes a child across international borders without permission from the other parent, the courts in the country where the child is taken will usually order the child to be returned to their country of habitual residence. The idea is that custody disputes should be settled where the child normally lives, not where one parent randomly decides to take them. It sounds fair, right? It sounds like it protects children from being kidnapped by angry exes, and in many cases, it probably does. But when you are a mother fleeing abuse, it becomes a legal weapon pointed straight at your heart. I read dozens of stories online. Women who had fled with their children to escape violence, only to be sued under the Hague Convention and forced to return. Women who lost custody because they were labeled as abductors. Women who were sent back to countries where they had no support, no money, no legal rights, and no protection from their abusers. One woman wrote about being forced to return to Saudi Arabia, where she lost all custody of her children because Sharia courts ruled she was not fit to raise them as a non-Muslim. Another wrote about going back to the UK, where her abusive ex used his Hague Convention win as evidence that she was unstable and untrustworthy, and the family court gave him primary custody. I felt like I was reading my own future, but I also kept reading stories about women who had stayed, women whose partners killed them, women whose children grew up traumatized by witnessing violence, women who spent years living in fear, walking on eggshells, losing themselves piece by piece. I did not know what to do. Every option felt impossible. Stay and risk our safety, or leave and risk losing Lily forever. I started documenting everything, just in case. I took photos of the holes Daniel punched in walls, the broken picture frames, the smashed phone. I recorded him screaming at me, calling me names, threatening to take Lily away if I ever tried to leave. I told my doctor about the fear I felt, the anxiety, the way I had started having panic attacks. She noted it in my file and gave me a referral to a therapist. But every time I thought about actually leaving, I remembered that Australia was Lily's country of habitual residence. She was born here. She had lived here her whole life. If I took her without Daniel's permission, he could file a Hague application, and the courts would almost certainly order her to be returned to him. I felt trapped in a nightmare with no way out. The breaking point came on a Sunday morning when Lily was 3.5. I had made plans to meet another American expat for coffee. I told Daniel about it the day before. He said fine. But that morning, he changed his mind. "You are not going anywhere," he said. "I need you here today." I tried to explain that I had already made the plans, that it would be rude to cancel last minute. He said, "I do not care. You are my wife. You need to be here with your family." I said no. I said, "I am going." It was the first time in months I had really stood up to him. I grabbed my purse and started walking toward the door. That was when he grabbed my arm. His fingers dug into my bicep so hard I gasped. He spun me around and shoved me against the wall. "You are not going anywhere," he said again, his face inches from mine. Lily was in the living room playing with her dolls. She heard the commotion and came running. What she saw was her father with his hands wrapped around my throat, not choking me completely, not cutting off my air, but enough to terrify me, enough to make me think, this is it. This is how it ends. "Daddy, stop!" Lily screamed. She was crying, pulling at Daniel's shirt. "Daddy, you are hurting Mommy." Daniel let go immediately. He looked at his hands like he did not recognize them. He looked at Lily, at me, and then he walked out of the apartment without saying a word. I sank to the floor, gasping, my hands on my throat. Lily climbed into my lap, sobbing. "I am sorry, Mommy. I am sorry," she kept saying, like somehow this was her fault. I held her, and I made a decision. We could not stay. I did not care about the law, about custody agreements, about the Hague Convention. I could not let my daughter grow up watching her father hurt me. I could not let her think this was normal. This was love. This was what she should expect from her own relationship someday. But I also knew I could not just take her to Portland. Daniel would file a Hague application immediately, and the courts would send her right back. I needed a different plan. I needed somewhere with strong domestic violence protections, somewhere that might actually listen to my story. I spent 2 weeks researching. I acted like everything was fine with Daniel. I smiled. I cooked his favorite meals. I let him think I had learned my lesson. And in secret, I planned. Spain kept coming up in my research. Spain had strong domestic violence laws. Spain had shelters specifically for women fleeing abuse. And Spain was a Hague Convention country, which meant if I was going to be Hagued anyway, at least I would be Hagued from somewhere that might actually care about my safety. I told Daniel I wanted to take Lily to visit my parents in Portland for 3 weeks. He said no immediately. I begged. I cried. I told him I was feeling depressed, that I needed to see my family, that I thought it would help. His mother surprisingly backed me up. She told Daniel that I seemed very stressed lately, that maybe some time with my family would make me more settled, more content. He finally agreed, but only for 2 weeks, not 3, and only if I called him every single day and sent photos of Lily. I bought tickets to Portland with a layover in Madrid. One-way tickets, though Daniel did not know that. I packed our bags carefully. Not too much, nothing that would make him suspicious. Just enough clothes for what looked like a short trip. I left most of our stuff behind, including things that mattered to me, photos, jewelry my grandmother had given me. I could not risk him realizing what I was actually doing. The morning we left, Daniel drove us to the airport. He kissed Lily goodbye, told her to be good for Mommy. He kissed me and said, 2 weeks, not a day longer. I am going to miss you both so much, I said. We will miss you too. I meant it, in a way. I missed the Daniel I thought I had fallen in love with, the one who sent me flowers and made me laugh. But that Daniel had never really existed. The flight to Madrid was 14 hours. Lily slept for most of it, curled up in the seat next to me with her head on my lap. I did not sleep at all. I just stared out the window, watching the ocean below, thinking about what I was about to do. When we landed in Madrid, I did not get on the connecting flight to Portland. Instead, I took Lily and our bags and walked out of the airport into a city I had never been to before, in a country where I barely spoke the language, with no real plan except to survive. I had contacted a women's shelter before leaving Australia. They had agreed to take us in temporarily. The shelter was in a suburb outside Madrid, a plain-looking building with bars on the windows and cameras at the door. The women who ran it were kind, but firm. They explained the rules. No contact with the outside world without permission, no sharing our location with anyone. Counseling sessions twice a week. Help finding a lawyer. Lily was confused. She kept asking when we were going to see Grandma and Grandpa. I told her we had changed our plans, that we were having an adventure in Spain first. She accepted it the way children do, without questioning too deeply. For 3 days, I let myself believe we were safe. I let myself imagine that maybe this could actually work. Maybe I could get a job here, learn Spanish properly, build a new life for us. Maybe Daniel would eventually give up and move on. Then the papers arrived. Daniel had filed a Hague application. The Spanish courts were ordering me to appear for a hearing. I had been in Madrid for less than a week. The shelter helped me find a lawyer, a woman named Carmen, who specialized in domestic violence cases. She was in her 50s, with kind eyes and a straightforward manner. She sat me down in a small office and explained what was about to happen. The Hague Convention is very clear, she said. If a child has been taken from their country of habitual residence without permission from both parents, the courts will almost always order the child to be returned. There are only a few defenses. One is if the child has settled into their new environment, but you have only been here a few days, so that will not work. Another is if there is a grave risk that returning would expose the child to physical or psychological harm. That is my defense then, I said. Daniel is violent. I have proof. Carmen nodded. We will present everything you have. But I need you to understand, Emily. The Hague Convention is not a custody law. It is a jurisdictional law. The court here is not going to decide who is the better parent or who should have custody. They are only going to decide if Lily should be returned to Australia so that an Australian court can make those decisions. But if we go back, I will have nothing, I said. No support, no family, no money. Daniel's family has connections. They will destroy me in Australian courts. Carmen's expression was sympathetic but realistic. I know, she said. I have seen this many times. The Hague Convention was designed to prevent international child abduction, but it does not account for mothers fleeing abuse, and it is often weaponized by abusive fathers. The hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks later. In those 3 weeks, I barely slept. I went over my testimony 100 times. I organized all my evidence, the photos of bruises, The holes in walls, the recordings of Daniel screaming, the medical records documenting my anxiety and panic attacks, the police report I had finally filed the week before leaving Australia. Carmen warned me that Daniel would have a lawyer, probably a good one, that he would paint me as unstable, as a kidnapper, as someone who had stolen his child out of spite or revenge, that he would deny the abuse or minimize it. I told myself the truth would be enough. I told myself that when the judge heard my story, saw my evidence, she would understand why I ran. I was naive. Daniel flew to Madrid with his lawyer for the hearing. I saw him in the hallway outside the courtroom, and my whole body went cold. He was wearing a suit, his hair perfectly styled, his face the picture of concern. When he saw me, he did not look angry. He looked sad, devastated, like I had broken his heart. His lawyer was a man in his 60s, polished and confident. He approached Carmen before the hearing and tried to negotiate. If your client returns voluntarily, we will ask for leniency in the Australian custody proceedings. If she forces us to go through with this, we will seek full custody and supervised visitation only. Carmen told him we would see him in court. The hearing itself was surreal. It took place in a small courtroom with fluorescent lights and beige walls. The judge was a woman in her 50s, stern-looking, wearing black robes. She had an interpreter next to her, translating everything into English for me. Daniel's lawyer went first. He painted a picture of a devoted father who had been blindsided by his wife's betrayal. Daniel had given Emily permission to take their daughter to visit her family in the United States, he said. It was supposed to be a 2-week trip. Instead, Emily had deliberately diverted to Spain and disappeared, refusing all contact, denying Daniel any access to his child. This is a clear case of international child abduction, the lawyer said. The child's habitual residence is Australia. She was born there. She has lived there her entire life. Her father is there. Her extended family is there. Emily Carter has unlawfully removed her from her home, and under the Hague Convention, the child must be returned immediately. Then Daniel took the stand. He cried, actual tears running down his face. He talked about how much he loved Lily, how much he missed her, how devastated he was. He said he had no idea why I had done this, that everything had been fine in our marriage, that he was completely blindsided. When asked about the abuse allegations, he denied everything. He admitted that, yes, he had punched walls a few times during arguments, but he said he had never touched me, never threatened me, never made me feel unsafe. He said I was making up these allegations to justify kidnapping our daughter. My lawyer asked him about the bruises in the photos. He said he had no idea where they came from, that I could have done them to myself, that I had been acting strangely in the months before I left. My lawyer played one of the recordings, his voice screaming obscenities, threatening to take Lily away from me. He said I had provoked him, that I had recorded him without his consent during a private argument, that everyone says things they do not mean when they are angry. The judge's face was impassive. I could not tell what she was thinking. Then it was my turn. I took the stand, and I told my story. I told the judge about the escalating control, the violence, the fear. I showed her the photos, the medical records, the police report. I explained that I had not meant to keep Lily from her father forever, that I just needed to get us somewhere safe so I could figure out how to protect us legally. I tried to explain how trapped I had felt in Australia, how Daniel controlled our finances, how his family was influential and well-connected, how I had no support system, how I was terrified that if I tried to leave through the proper legal channels, he would take Lily from me anyway. Daniel's lawyer cross-examined me. He was brutal. He pointed out that I had lied to Daniel about where I was taking Lily. He pointed out that I had planned this for weeks, which proved it was premeditated, not a panicked escape. He pointed out that I had not contacted any authorities in Australia before leaving, had not sought a restraining order, had not filed for divorce or custody. If you were really in danger, why did you not seek help from the police? He asked. Why did you not file for custody in Australian courts? Why did you not try to work within the system? I tried to explain that I did not trust the system, that women like me often lose custody to their abusers, that I was terrified. But even as I said it, I could hear how it sounded. Like excuses, like justifications for doing something illegal. Carmen presented expert testimony from a domestic violence counselor who explained the patterns of abuse, the reasons why women flee, the power dynamics that make it nearly impossible to leave through proper channels. She presented statistics about how often Hague cases involving domestic violence result in mothers losing custody. She argued that returning Lily to Australia would put both of us at grave risk. But Daniel's lawyer kept hammering the same point. This court is not here to decide custody. This court is here to decide jurisdiction. And the law is clear. Lily's habitual residence is Australia. She must be returned so that Australian courts can make custody determinations. The judge asked Daniel's lawyer what protections would be in place for me if I returned to Australia. He said that I would be free to file for custody, that I could seek protective orders, that Australia had robust systems for dealing with domestic violence. Carmen asked if he could guarantee my safety. He said no one could guarantee anything, but that Australia was a developed nation with rule of law. The judge asked me directly, "If I order you to return to Australia with your daughter, will you comply?" I wanted to say no. I wanted to scream that I would rather die than go back. But I knew that if I refused, Spanish authorities would take Lily from me by force and send her back to Daniel without me. At least if I went back, I would be there to protect her. So I said yes, I will comply. The judge took a week to make her decision. That week was the longest of my life. I barely ate. I barely spoke. Lily could sense something was wrong, and she started having nightmares, waking up crying in the middle of the night. When the decision came, Carmen called me to her office to deliver it in person. I knew from her face that we had lost. "The judge has ordered Lily to be returned to Australia," she said. "You have 72 hours to comply. If you do not, Spanish authorities will enforce the order." I wanted to ask if there was any way to appeal, any way to fight this, but I already knew the answer. Carmen explained that appeals in Hague cases are rare and almost never successful. The system is designed for speed, not nuance. "What happens when I go back?" I asked. "You will be in Australian family court," Carmen said. "You will have to fight for custody there. I cannot tell you how that will go. But I can tell you this, Emily. The fact that you are Hagued will be used against you. Daniel's lawyers will argue that you are a flight risk, that you are unstable, that you kidnapped your daughter. You will be starting from a position of weakness." I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. I had thought I was saving us. Instead, I had destroyed everything. I told Lily that night that we had to go back to Australia. I tried to explain it in a way she could understand. But how do you explain this to a 4-year-old? She cried. She said, "I do not want to go back to Daddy. He scares me." "I know, baby," I said. "I know. But we have to, just for a little while, and I promise I will keep you safe." I did not know if I could keep that promise, but I had to try. The flight back to Sydney was a nightmare. Lily cried for most of it. I held her and stared out the window and tried to prepare myself for what was coming. Daniel was waiting at the airport with his lawyer and a police officer. The moment we cleared customs, he approached us. His face was cold, triumphant. The police officer informed me that Daniel had temporary custody orders and that Lily would be going with him. "No," I said. "No, I came back. I complied with the court order. You cannot just take her." But they could, and they did. Daniel took Lily from my arms right there in the terminal. She screamed. She reached for me. "Mommy, Mommy, please do not let him take me." Daniel held her tight and said, "It is okay, sweetheart. Mommy is just very sick right now. We need to get you home where you are safe." The police officer handed me papers, a court date, a temporary custody order, a restraining order that said I could not come within 100 meters of Daniel's apartment or his workplace. I stood in that airport terminal, watching my daughter being carried away by the man I had tried so hard to escape from, and I felt like I was dying. I was served with full custody papers the next day. Daniel was seeking primary, physical, and legal custody, citing my instability and flight risk. His lawyer was asking for supervised visitation only, if any visitation at all. I had to find a lawyer, fast. I emptied my savings account, which was not much. I called my parents, and they helped as much as they could, but they were not wealthy. I found a family law attorney who agreed to take my case, a woman named Rebecca, who had experience with domestic violence cases. She was honest with me from the start. "This is going to be an uphill battle," she said. "The fact that you were Hagued is going to weigh heavily against you. We need to present a strong case that Daniel is abusive and that supervised visitation is not in Lily's best interest. But I need you to prepare yourself for the possibility that we might not win full custody." The custody battle lasted 8 months. 8 months of hell. 8 months of supervised visitation in a sterile room with a social worker taking notes on every interaction. 8 months of court hearings and depositions and evaluations. 8 months of being picked apart, questioned, doubted. I saw Lily 2 hours a week at first, supervised. She would cry when our time was up. She started having nightmares again. She started wetting the bed. The social worker noted that she seemed anxious and traumatized. But somehow, in the court documents, that became evidence against me. "The child has been destabilized by the mother's actions," they wrote. "The child shows signs of distress that appear to be connected to confusion about the mother's choices." Daniel's lawyers were relentless. They painted me as a hysterical American who could not handle a strong Australian man. They said I had made up the abuse allegations to justify my plan to kidnap Lily. They presented character witnesses, Daniel's friends, his co-workers, his family, all testifying that he was a devoted father who had never shown any signs of violence. They brought in a psychologist who evaluated both of us. The psychologist concluded that I showed signs of anxiety and depression, which was hardly surprising given what I had been through. But in the report, it sounded damning. The mother presents with significant emotional instability. There are concerns about her ability to make rational decisions regarding the child's welfare. Daniel, meanwhile, was calm, composed, cooperative. He completed a parenting course, he attended therapy, he did everything the court asked, and his evaluation came back glowing. The father is engaged, appropriate, and demonstrates a strong bond with the child. My evidence of abuse was picked apart piece by piece. The photos of bruises, they could have come from anywhere, Daniel's lawyer argued. The recordings, taken without consent during private arguments. The police report, filed suspiciously right before I left the country, clearly part of my premeditated plan. The fact that I had fled to Spain instead of seeking help through proper Australian channels was used against me repeatedly. It proved I did not respect the law. It proved I was willing to lie and deceive. It proved I could not be trusted. Rebecca did her best. She presented testimony from domestic violence experts. She showed the patterns of coercive control. She argued that the Hague Convention system had failed me, that I had been forced into an impossible situation. But the family court judge was not sympathetic. At the final hearing, he said, "Whatever problems existed in this marriage, the mother's choice to remove the child from her habitual residence without permission was unlawful and harmful to the child. The mother has demonstrated poor judgment and a willingness to prioritize her own desires over the child's need for stability and relationship with both parents." The judge gave Daniel primary physical custody. I was granted visitation, 4 days per month, supervised for the first year, to be reviewed after 12 months based on my cooperation and stability. I felt like I had been gutted. 4 days a month. Supervised. With my own daughter. The judge also ordered me to pay child support, which seemed absurd given that I barely saw her. And he ordered me to cover half of Daniel's legal fees, which I had no way to pay. I walked out of that courtroom, and I sat on a bench outside and I sobbed. Rebecca sat next to me, silent, Because what was there to say? We had tried. We had presented everything. And we had lost. The first supervised visit after the custody ruling was the hardest thing I have ever done. The visitation center was in a nondescript building in the suburbs. There was a waiting room with plastic chairs and old magazines. There was a playroom with toys that looked like they had been donated from a thrift store. And there was a social worker, a woman in her 30s named Michelle, who sat in the corner with a clipboard and watched everything. When Lily walked in, she ran to me. She threw her arms around my neck and would not let go. I could feel her little heart beating against my chest. I could smell her shampoo, the same strawberry-scented one I used to use when I gave her baths. "Mommy, I missed you so much," she said. "When can I come stay with you? When can we go home?" I did not know how to answer. This was home now, these 2 hours in a sterile room with a stranger watching us. I said, "Soon, baby. We will figure it out soon." We played with the toys, we read books, we drew pictures, and every minute I was aware of Michelle in the corner, writing notes. What was she writing? Was I playing wrong? Talking wrong? Holding Lily too tight, or not tight enough? When our time was up, Lily cried. She begged me not to make her go. Michelle had to gently pry her hands off my shirt. "I will see you again soon," I promised. "Be good for Daddy, okay?" Daniel was waiting in the parking lot. Lily walked toward him slowly, dragging her feet. He picked her up and gave me this look over her shoulder. This smug, victorious look that made me want to scream. That was my life for a year. 2 hours, once a week, supervised. I got a job as a freelance designer again, working from a tiny apartment I could barely afford. I showed up to every single visit, exactly on time, with activities planned, with snacks and books and games. I did everything Michelle suggested. I took parenting classes. I went to therapy. I was a model of cooperation and stability. After a year, the supervision was lifted. I was granted 4 full days per month, Friday evening through Monday morning, twice a month. It still was not enough, but it was something. I could have Lily in my own apartment. I could cook for her. I could put her to bed and wake up with her. I could, for brief moments, pretend we were a normal family. But the damage had been done. Lily was different. She was quieter, more anxious. She would wake up in the middle of the night crying. She started having trouble at school, trouble concentrating, trouble making friends. Her teacher called to say she seemed withdrawn. I asked Daniel if we could get Lily into therapy. He said no, that she was fine, that I was being dramatic. I went to court to ask for permission to take her to a therapist. The judge agreed, but said that Daniel had to be included in all decisions about her treatment, which meant that every therapy session became a negotiation, a battle. The therapist, a kind woman named Dr. Lisa Tran, diagnosed Lily with anxiety and post-traumatic stress. She said Lily was struggling to process everything that had happened, the sudden trip to Spain, the separation from me, the court battles, the tension between her parents. She recommended that Lily see her twice a week. Daniel argued that was too much, that it would interfere with her routine. We compromised on once a week. After another 6 months, I went back to court to ask for more time with Lily. Rebecca presented evidence that I had been fully compliant, that supervision had been lifted without incident, that Lily was doing better when she was with me. The judge agreed to increase my time to alternating weekends, Friday evening through Sunday evening, plus 1 weeknight dinner per week. It still was not anywhere near 50-50, but it was progress. That was 3 years ago now. Lily is 7. I see her every other weekend and every Wednesday evening for dinner. It is not enough. It will never be enough. But it is what I have, and I hold on to it with everything I have. Lily is smart and funny and resilient. She loves art, just like I do. She draws these elaborate pictures of imaginary worlds, places where, she tells me, people are always nice and nobody yells. She wants to be a veterinarian when she grows up because she loves animals and wants to help them, But she also has anxiety that breaks my heart. She worries constantly. She asks me questions I do not always know how to answer. Why did you take me to Spain, Mommy? Why did Daddy say you kidnapped me? Did you do something bad? Are you a bad person? I try to explain in ways she can understand. I tell her that sometimes grown-ups make mistakes when they are scared, that I was trying to keep us safe, but I did not do it the right way. That the court decided I should have talked to a judge in Australia first instead of leaving. That I am not a bad person, I just made a bad choice. She nods, but I can see the confusion in her eyes. I can see that she is trying to make sense of a situation that does not make sense. How do you explain to a 7-year-old that the law meant to protect children sometimes hurts them instead? She asks me if I am going to take her away again. I promise her I will never do that. I tell her that we have to follow the rules now, that I have learned my lesson. But I can see the worry in her face. I can see that she does not fully trust me anymore, and that knowledge is like a knife in my chest. Daniel has moved on with his life. He has a girlfriend now, a woman named Sophie who is 25 and works in marketing. She is sweet to Lily, from what I can tell, which I am grateful for. They are talking about getting married, about having more children. Patricia loves Sophie, says she is so much more appropriate than I ever was. I sometimes wonder what my life would look like if I had made different choices. If I had never met Daniel. If I had never moved to Australia. If I had tried to leave through the proper legal channels instead of fleeing to Spain. But the truth is, I do not know if the proper legal channels would have worked. I have spent 3 years reading stories from other mothers, and the pattern is always the same. Women who flee abuse often lose custody because they are seen as unstable, as vindictive, as alienating the children from the other parent. Women who stay and try to document the abuse often cannot get enough evidence because abusers are careful. They are charming to outsiders. They know how to hide what they do behind closed doors. There is no good choice. There is only impossible choices and devastating consequences. I think about the Hague Convention a lot, about how it was designed with good intentions, to prevent actual kidnappings, to stop non-custodial parents from stealing children. But in practice, it has become a tool that abusive fathers use to maintain control over their victims. When you are Hagued, you are labeled an abductor. That label follows you forever. It poisons every custody hearing, every evaluation, every interaction with the court system. It does not matter why you left. It does not matter what you were running from. You broke the law, and therefore you cannot be trusted. The judges who order children to be returned under the Hague Convention never see what happens next. They never get feedback. They never know how many mothers lose custody, how many are re-traumatized, how many never get their children back. They make their rulings based on jurisdiction and law, and then they move on to the next case. Meanwhile, mothers and children are left to deal with the consequences. I joined an online support group for mothers who have been Hagued. There are hundreds of us. Women from all over the world, all with similar stories. Women who fled to their home countries only to be forced back. Women who lost custody completely. Women who are still fighting years later for the right to see their children. One woman in the group, I will call her Maria, fled from Saudi Arabia to Spain with her 2 children. Her husband was abusive and controlling. Under Sharia law in Saudi Arabia, she had almost no custody rights as a woman. The Hague Convention does not apply to Saudi Arabia because they are not a signatory, but her husband used other legal means to get the children back. She has not seen them in 5 years. Another woman, I will call her Jane, fled from the UK to New Zealand. She was Hagued and forced to return. The UK courts gave her abusive ex-husband primary custody, saying that she had proven herself unstable by fleeing. She sees her children 1 weekend a month. Her ex continues to harass her, to use the court system to punish her. She has spent over £100,000 in legal fees and has nothing left. These stories are not rare. They are not exceptions. This is what happens to mothers who try to protect their children from abuse by crossing international borders. There is a perverse irony in the fact that the Hague Convention, a treaty meant to protect children, so often results in them being placed in dangerous situations. Because the convention is only about jurisdiction, not safety. It assumes that all countries have adequate systems to protect children from abuse. It assumes that women fleeing violence have the resources and support to fight for custody in court. Those assumptions are wrong, dangerously wrong. Australia, where I am, is actually one of the better countries in terms of domestic violence resources. There are shelters, hotlines, legal aid services. And yet, I still lost custody. I still see my daughter only a fraction of the time. I still live with the constant fear that Daniel will move away, or remarry and push me out further, or turn Lily against me completely. If this can happen in Australia, imagine what happens in countries with fewer protections. Imagine what happens to women who are hagged back to places where they have no legal rights, where domestic violence is not taken seriously, where women are second-class citizens. I think about the mother I was 4 years ago, standing in my apartment in Bondi, Daniel's hands around my throat, Lily crying in the background. I think about the moment I decided to run, and I ask myself, would I make the same choice again, knowing what I know now? The answer is, I honestly do not know. Because staying felt impossible. Every day I stayed was another day that Lily witnessed violence, another day that she learned to normalize abuse, another day that I lived in fear for our lives. How do you stay in that situation? How do you look at your child and tell yourself that staying is the safer option? But leaving destroyed everything. It destroyed my relationship with Lily, or at least damaged it in ways I am still trying to repair. It destroyed my finances, my career, my sense of safety. It labeled me a criminal, an abductor, an unfit mother. It gave Daniel exactly what he wanted, control over me and over Lily. So which choice was right? I do not know. I may never know. What I do know is that the system failed me. Failed us. Failed hundreds of mothers like me who were just trying to protect their children. The Hague Convention needs to be reformed. It needs to have explicit protections for domestic violence survivors. It needs to require courts to thoroughly investigate what will happen to women and children if they are sent back. It needs to stop treating all border crossings as equal, regardless of context. Domestic laws in countries that implement the Hague Convention need to change too. In Australia, there have been proposals to amend the family law regulations to make it explicit that domestic violence constitutes a grave risk of harm and an intolerable situation. But those proposals have not been enacted. They have been sitting there since 1994. 1994. 30 years of mothers being hagged, losing their children, being sent back to their abusers. And still, the law has not changed. Judges need to be educated about the realities of domestic violence, about coercive control, about how abusers weaponize the legal system. They need to understand that not all parents who cross borders with children are kidnappers. Some of us are just desperate mothers trying to survive, and courts need to follow up. They need to track what happens to mothers and children after Hague orders are enforced. They need data, real data, about outcomes. Because right now, they are making life and death decisions based on assumptions that may not be true. I have started speaking out about my experience. I have shared my story in the support group. I have talked to journalists, though many of them lose interest when they realize how complicated the legal issues are. I have written to politicians, though most of them send back form letters thanking me for my concern. It feels like shouting into the void sometimes. But I have to believe that if enough of us speak up, if enough of us refuse to be silent, eventually someone will listen. Eventually, the law will change. Because there are mothers right now, in this moment, who are in the situation I was in 4 years ago. They are living with abusive partners. They are terrified for themselves and their children. They are researching the Hague Convention late at night and realizing that there is no good way out. I want those mothers to know that they are not alone. I want them to know that I see them, that I understand the impossible choice they are facing. I do not have answers. I do not know what they should do. Every situation is different. Every country is different. Every abuser is different. But I want them to know that they are not crazy. They are not overreacting. They are not bad mothers. They are women trying to survive impossible situations with systems that were not designed for them. And I want people who have never experienced this, who cannot imagine what it is like to choose between staying with an abuser and losing your child, to understand, to really understand, that this is not about bitter exes making false accusations. This is not about parental alienation or manipulation. This is about women and children whose lives are at stake. Domestic violence is not just physical bruises. It is not just broken bones and black eyes. It is coercive control, financial abuse, emotional manipulation, isolation, intimidation. It is a pattern of behavior designed to strip you of your autonomy, your confidence, your sense of self. And when you try to leave, the abuser will use every tool available, including the law, to continue controlling you. That is what the Hague Convention became for Daniel. A tool, a weapon, a way to punish me for daring to leave, for daring to think I could protect our daughter from him. I still have nightmares about that day in the Madrid airport when they took Lily from my arms. I wake up gasping, my heart racing, reaching for her. And then I remember where I am, in my tiny apartment in Sydney, and I check my phone to count the days until I see her again. Wednesday nights are the hardest because they are so short. I pick Lily up from school at 3:30, and I have to drop her back at Daniel's apartment by 7:30. 4 hours. That is all I get in the middle of the week. We rush through homework, rush through dinner, rush through everything because there is never enough time. She always asks if she can sleep over. Just this once, Mommy, please. And I have to say no, baby. Not tonight. The rules say I can only have you on my weekends. And I see the disappointment in her face, the resignation. She is 7 years old and already learning that her life is dictated by court orders and parenting schedules. On my weekends, I try to make everything perfect. We go to the beach, to the zoo, to museums. We bake cookies. We watch movies. We stay up a little too late talking about her dreams, her fears, her friends at school. I try to pack a lifetime of mothering into 48 hours every 2 weeks. But I can see the toll it is taking on her. She has trouble with transitions. Every time I drop her back at Daniel's, she shuts down. She stops talking, stops making eye contact. It takes her a day or two to readjust. And then, just as she is settling in, it is time to come back to me, and the cycle starts again. Dr. Tran says this is normal for children in high-conflict custody situations. She says Lily is caught between two worlds, two parents who cannot be in the same room without tension crackling in the air. She says the best thing we can do is be consistent, be loving, and try not to put Lily in the middle. But how do you not put a child in the middle when the entire legal system has placed her there? When every decision about her life requires negotiation between two people who fundamentally do not trust each other? Daniel and I communicate only through a court-mandated app now. Every message is monitored and can be used as evidence in future hearings. So we speak in careful, neutral language. I will pick up Lily at 3:30 on Friday. Please ensure her homework folder is in her backpack. Lily has a dentist appointment on Tuesday at 4. I will send you the receipt for your portion of the copay. There is no warmth, no cooperation, no co-parenting in any real sense. Just transactions, logistics, the bare minimum required by the court order. Patricia still makes her opinions known. She sends gifts for Lily that arrive at Daniel's apartment, never to my place. She posts photos on social media of Lily at their family gatherings, always captioned with things like, "So blessed to have our sweet granddaughter back where she belongs," or "Family is everything." I have to scroll past them and pretend they do not feel like knives. Sophie, Daniel's girlfriend, is a wild card. Sometimes I am grateful that Lily has another woman in her life who is kind to her. Other times I am terrified that Sophie will replace me, that Lily will start calling her mom, that I will become even more irrelevant. Lily mentioned recently that Sophie wants to take her shopping for her birthday. I said that sounds nice, and inside I was screaming. I am her mother. I should be taking her shopping for her birthday, but I cannot say that. I cannot put that burden on Lily. So I smile and say, "That will be fun, baby," and I die a little more inside. Money is a constant struggle. The legal fees from the custody battle left me in debt. I am still paying off Rebecca's final bill in monthly installments. I pay child support to Daniel, which feels absurd, given that he makes 3 times what I do, and I see Lily less than 20% of the time. But the court calculated it based on our incomes, and so I pay. I cannot afford to move to a bigger apartment. I cannot afford to take Lily on the kind of vacations Daniel takes her on. He has sent her to Bali, to the Gold Coast, to Tasmania. I take her to free museums and public beaches. She never complains, but I can see her comparing. I can see her absorbing the message that Daddy's house is the nice house, the fun house, the real house. I have thought about leaving Australia, going back to Portland where my family is, but I cannot. My custody order specifically states that I cannot relocate more than 50 kilometers from Daniel's residence without his permission or a court order, and he will never give permission. If I leave, I lose Lily. So I am trapped here, in a city that never really felt like home, forever tethered to a man I desperately wanted to escape. My parents come to visit when they can, but they are getting older, and the flight from Portland is long and expensive. My mom cries every time she sees how little time I have with Lily. My dad gets angry, wants to know why the system allowed this to happen, wants to hire more lawyers and fight harder. But I am so tired of fighting. I am so tired of losing. Sarah, my best friend from Portland, calls me every week. She listens to me cry. She reminds me that I did the best I could with an impossible situation. She tells me that Lily knows I love her, that our bond will survive this. I want to believe her. Some days I do. Other days, I am not so sure. I have been in therapy for 2 years now. My therapist, a woman named Dr. Karen Mitchell, specializes in trauma. She has helped me understand that what I experienced was not just a bad relationship, it was systematic abuse. She has helped me see the patterns of control, the gaslighting, the ways Daniel manipulated me into doubting my own reality. But she has also helped me grieve, because that is what this is. Grief. I lost my daughter, not to death, but to a legal system that valued jurisdiction over safety. I lost years of her childhood that I will never get back. I lost the relationship we could have had if I had never met Daniel, or if I had left differently, or if the world was just fundamentally more fair. Dr. Mitchell says I need to forgive myself. She says I made the choices I thought were right with the information I had at the time. She says I cannot carry the weight of the entire Hague Convention on my shoulders, but it is hard not to. It is hard not to lie awake at night replaying every decision, every moment, wondering what I could have done differently. Would it have been better to stay? To endure the abuse? To document everything meticulously? To build an ironclad case in Australian courts? Maybe. But maybe Daniel would have escalated. Maybe one day his hands around my throat would not have stopped. Maybe Lily would have been left with a dead mother and a father in prison. Or worse, a dead mother and a father who got away with it because these things are so often unprosecuted. There is no way to know. There are no parallel universes where I can see how the other paths would have played out. There is only this reality, the one I am living in, the one where I made a desperate choice and paid an enormous price. I want people to understand that this is not a unique story. I am not special. This happens all the time, to mothers all over the world. There is a woman in the support group who fled from the United States to Canada with her children. Her ex-husband was violent, had threatened to kill her multiple times. She was Hagued back to the US. She lost custody. Her ex-husband now has the children full-time, and she sees them one weekend a month. The children have started exhibiting behavioral problems, signs that they may be experiencing abuse themselves. But when she reports it to Child Protective Services, nothing happens. Her ex is charming, well-liked, has no criminal record, and she is the woman who kidnapped the kids. Another woman fled from Australia to the UK. Her husband was Saudi, and she was terrified he would take their children to Saudi Arabia where she would have no rights. She was Hagued back to Australia. During the custody proceedings, her ex did exactly what she feared. He took the kids to Saudi Arabia on what was supposed to be a supervised visit and never came back. She has been fighting for 4 years to see her children. The Hague Convention does not apply because Saudi Arabia is not a signatory. Her children are trapped in a country where she has no legal standing, where women have almost no custody rights, where her ex-husband's family has all the power. These stories are a horror show, and they are happening right now, today, to real women and real children. The Hague Convention is in desperate need of reform. Organizations like Hague Mothers in the UK are fighting for changes. They are advocating for explicit domestic violence exceptions, for better judicial training, for follow-up studies on what happens to women and children after they are Hagued. But change is slow, glacially slow, because the Hague Convention is an international treaty, and amending it requires agreement from over 100 countries. In the meantime, women keep losing their children. Some countries have made small changes to their domestic implementation of the convention. New Zealand had a landmark case a few years ago where the Court of Appeal actually refused to order a child's return, specifically because of the mother's history of domestic violence and concerns about what would happen to her if she went back. It was a breakthrough, a sign that maybe, slowly, the courts are starting to understand. But that was one case. One. And for every case like that, there are dozens where mothers are still being Hagued, still losing custody, still being sent back to their abusers. I have thought about what reforms would have helped me. The biggest one is simple. Courts need to thoroughly investigate what will happen to mothers and children if they are returned. Not just in theory, but in reality. What support will be available? What are the actual statistics on custody outcomes for abuse survivors in that jurisdiction? What protections exist, and are they effective? In my case, the Spanish judge assumed that Australia had robust protections for domestic violence survivors. And on paper, it does. But in practice, I still lost custody, because the Australian family court weighed Daniel's Hague win more heavily than my evidence of abuse, because I was labeled an abductor, and that label poisoned everything that came after. If the Spanish judge had known that, would she have made a different decision? Maybe not. The law is clear after all. But maybe she would have asked harder questions. Maybe she would have required more guarantees. Another reform that would help is making domestic violence an explicit exception to return orders. Right now, the convention has a vague grave risk exception, but it is interpreted very narrowly. Courts are reluctant to use it because they do not want to undermine the whole purpose of the convention. But domestic violence is different from other custody disputes. It is not about two parents who just cannot get along. It is about one parent using violence and control to dominate the other. And when you force a victim to return to the country where their abuser has power, you are handing that abuser another tool to hurt them. There also needs to be better enforcement of protective measures. In theory, courts can order protections for women who are Hagued. Things like restraining orders, supervised exchanges, requirements that the father stay away from the mother. But in practice, those orders are often ignored or poorly enforced. And when a woman is in a foreign country with no support system, no money, no resources, she has no way to fight back when her abuser violates those orders. Finally, there needs to be accountability. Courts that issue Hague return orders should be required to follow up. What happened to that mother and child 6 months later? A year later? Did the mother get custody, or did she lose? Is she safe? Is the child safe? That data needs to be collected and published so that future courts can make informed decisions. Right now, there is no accountability. Judges make their rulings and move on. They never see the devastation they leave behind. I want to be clear about something. I am not saying the Hague Convention should be abolished. I understand why it exists. There are real cases of parents kidnapping children out of spite, out of revenge, out of a desire to cut the other parent out of the child's life completely. Those children need to be protected, but the convention needs to account for the reality that not all border crossings are kidnappings. Some are escapes, and treating them the same way is dangerous. I also want to say that I know there are fathers who are victims of domestic violence too. I know there are mothers who are abusers. This is not about gender, not really. It is about power and control. And it is about a legal system that needs to be better at recognizing when someone is fleeing danger versus when someone is just trying to manipulate custody. For me, 3 years later, I am still fighting. Not in court anymore. I cannot afford to go back to court. But fighting to maintain my relationship with Lily, to help her heal from the trauma of everything that happened, to build a life that feels livable, even though it is not the life I wanted. Lily and I have started doing art projects together. She loves drawing and painting, and so do I. On my weekends, we set up my tiny kitchen table with supplies, and we create. She draws her imaginary worlds, and I draw alongside her. We do not talk about the hard stuff during these times. We just create. And in those moments, I feel like maybe, just maybe, we are going to be okay. She is doing better in school now. Her anxiety is still there, but it is more managed. Dr. Tran has been working with her on coping strategies, and they seem to help. She has made a few good friends, kids who invite her to birthday parties and play dates. I coordinate with Daniel on these things, and we manage to be civil for Lily's sake. There are moments when I can almost imagine a future where this is normal, where the pain dulls enough that I can function without feeling like I am constantly drowning. Where Lily grows up and understands that I did the best I could. Where maybe, eventually, I can forgive myself. But I will never stop advocating for change. I will never stop sharing my story, because somewhere out there is a mother who is in the situation I was in, and she needs to know she is not alone. She needs to know that whatever choice she makes, it is not her fault that the system is broken. If you are that mother, I see you. I understand the impossible position you are in. I do not have easy answers. I do not know what you should do. But I want you to know that you are not crazy. You are not a bad mother. And you deserve so much better than what you are going through. And if you are someone who has never experienced this, someone who cannot imagine being in this position, I want you to understand something. It is easy to judge from the outside. It is easy to say, why did she not just go through the proper channels? Why did she not document everything? Why did she not leave sooner? But when you are living in it, when you are terrified for your life and your child's life, when you have no money and no support, and an abuser who is charming and credible to everyone else, the so-called proper channels feel like a fantasy. They feel like something designed for people who have resources and time and safety, none of which you have. I made the choices I made because I was desperate and terrified and out of options. Were they the right choices? I do not know. Maybe there were no right choices, only impossible ones. What I do know is that the system failed me. It failed Lily. And it is failing hundreds of other mothers and children right now. That needs to change. I think about the woman I was 5 years ago, swiping on a language exchange app, thinking I was just going to practice Spanish. I think about how excited I was when Daniel sent me flowers, how hopeful I was when I moved to Sydney, how joyful I was when Lily was born. I would go back and warn that woman if I could. I would tell her to run, to never get on that plane, to choose literally anyone else. But I cannot. So instead, I live with the consequences, and I try to find meaning in the pain. Lily asked me last week if I regretted having her. The question broke my heart. "Of course not, baby," I said. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me. I would go through everything again if it meant I got to be your mom." And I meant it. Despite everything, despite all the pain and loss and trauma, I do not regret Lily. She is my daughter. She is my whole heart. And I will keep fighting for her, for as long as it takes, in whatever ways I can. That is what mothers do. We fight impossible battles. We make impossible choices. We carry impossible burdens. And we do it because we love our children more than we love ourselves, more than we fear the consequences, more than anything else in the world. I thought taking my daughter to Spain would save us. It did not. But I am still here. Lily is still here. And we are surviving, day by day, moment by moment. That has to be enough. Because it is all I have left. If you have experienced something similar, if you are a mother who has been hagged or who is facing this nightmare right now, please share your story in the comments below. The more we speak up, the harder it becomes to ignore us. Your story matters. Your pain matters. You matter. And if this story moved you, if it opened your eyes to something you did not know was happening, please consider liking and sharing this video so it reaches people who need to hear it. Subscribe to this channel and hit the notification bell so you do not miss future stories about mothers facing impossible situations in international custody battles. I want to keep bringing these important experiences to light, and I would love to hear from you. What story do you need to hear next? Where are you listening from right now? Let me know in the comments. Thank you for listening. Thank you for caring enough to make it to the end.